Just checking in again. Just was made aware from Ron's office, he's minutes away. So he should be joining us very, very shortly.
I'm here.
And there he is. Hey, Ron, how are you?
Good, John. How about yourself?
Oh, not too bad. Busy day this morning in Washington?
Generally, it's not a boring job.
A lot of stuff going on. I saw you last night with Laura Baker in that interview. Very well done. So keep up the good work. I'm gonna do a few comments, and then we're gonna throw it over to you, make some comments about things that you're working on, things going on in Washington, and then we're gonna open it up for some questions. Do you have a hard stop time?
Not really.
Not really. Well, let's go to 2 o'clock then this afternoon, and we'll make that work.
I do have to put in the old feed bag.
Yeah, there you go. Well, we can make something work for you. So again, hey, thanks for joining us. We're starting off our town hall sessions again virtually. These seem to work out pretty well for our representatives, and this is being recorded, so we will be having it on our website. We will be doing these every Wednesday at 10 o'clock. So, for those of you who like to keep updated, these are good things to do. So with that, Ron, I'm going to throw it over to you for a few, for how many minutes you want to take, and talk about things you're working on, things are going on, and then we'll open it up for questions. If anybody has a question, just use the Q&A tab on the bottom of your screen, and then I'll be going through those and asking those questions. So Senator Johnson, take it away.
I'll start with my standard caveat that I'm not the most uplifting character, because I'm going to tell you the truth. And right now, the reality is pretty ugly. When you talk about what I've been working on, that pretty good example of what I just left was a business meeting. This is a markup of legislation from the Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs Committee. And it's a pretty good example of kind of what the battle lines look like around here. We were arguing over a bill to require businesses to report cyber attacks. Now, the bill is primarily focused on critical infrastructure industries, which I support. These are highly regulated industries. These affect all of us. When there are cyber attacks, when there are ransomware attacks like the Colonial Pipeline, I think this is one of the things that prompted this particular piece of legislation. We need to know about it. And this is what we do need government to be involved from the standpoint of FBI, in some cases recovery of some of the ransomware before it could be turned to cryptocurrency. So I have no problem, but as part of this bill, they include a provision to require all businesses, except those 50 employees or under, to report any ransomware incident or payment. Now, again, think of how many businesses are, over 50 that don't even know what the Cyber Security Infrastructure Security Agency is. That's what CISA is. And then all of a sudden now you have to report in 24 hours a ransom payment, no matter what the size. Maybe it's $500, maybe it's 5,000. It's just, it's gross. You're a victim of a crime, but you're concerned about keeping your business going. You're not concerned about, okay, now what government regulation do I need to follow here? What agency do I need to figure out, first of all, who to contact, what's the number? And you've got 24 hours reported, or you're violating a regulation of federal law. So it was actually pretty amazing. Senator Scott, who's a great ally here, former business person, offered an amendment to basically strip away that provision for any business that isn't part of critical infrastructure. And I support that. And we had a big, long debate. And the debate just focuses on how the federal government has to force people for their own good to report these things in 24 hours. They're talking about, otherwise these businesses are going to go out of business. And I kept pointing out, well, when you're in the midst of a ransomware attack, you're trying to get your business back up and running, you're trying to survive. How is reporting to the government going to help you from that standpoint? I remind everybody of Ronald Reagan's famous phrase, "I'm the federal government here. I'm here to help you." So that's kind of a small little microcosm of some of the, let me call it inane bills that we debate. And by the way, it will be passed out of committee. There'll probably be just a couple of us that vote no, because I guess once you're here, you're a lawmaker, you got to make law. You're a regulator, you got to regulate. And that's how government grows and becomes so incredibly intrusive and all controlling over our lives. But so that's a small example. Of course, now let's talk about the big one. Let's talk about the Bernie budget. Let's talk about increasing the debt ceiling. Democrats had no problem. As soon as they took total control of government, they passed a $1.9 trillion COVID relief bill. Now, this is on top of $4 trillion that we'd already passed. I supported way more than I wanted to support, but early on, you had to vote for the CARES Act because we had to do something fast. We had to do something massive so that markets wouldn't collapse. But I knew how grossly imperfect it was, and it is grossly imperfect. We have literally wasted hundreds of billions, if not trillions of dollars in that shotgun approach to providing COVID relief. But when the Democrats passed their 100% partisan $1.9 trillion COVID relief, we had approximately $1 trillion of the previous $4 trillion that was still unspent. The 1.9 trillion, 700 billion isn't even spent, scheduled to be spent till 2022 through 2028. Obviously not necessary COVID relief. So Democrats had no problem passing that on a purely partisan basis. They had no problem passing a budget reconciliation, which sets up the actual legislation of $3.5 trillion. I call that the Bernie budget. It's scored with gimmicks, so it's only 3.5 trillion. It's probably more like 5.5, because they create a new entitlement, say it's going to sunset in a few years, knowing full well, again, as Ronald Reagan said, the closest thing to eternal life on this earth is a government program. So they know that once they create an entitlement, it's almost impossible to get rid of it. So that's the state of play. Leader McConnell, very early on, once they passed their the Bernie budget, basically stated, okay, well, you guys are doing all this through reconciliation process. You have the complete capability. You control all the levers of the legislative and executive branch. You can increase the debt ceiling to accommodate your deficit spending. So this is back in July. Once I heard Leader McConnell make that statement, I thought, well, I'm going to get Republican senators on record supporting his position. So I drafted a letter, had some senators add some pretty good edits, and we got 46 of Republican senators saying, okay, you're doing all this deficit spending on a purely partisan basis. You're going to have to increase the debt ceiling to accommodate that spending. So here you are, you're on notice. We're telling you on August, whatever it was, early in August, utilize your reconciliation powers, do it with your 50 votes, and increase the debt ceiling. You need to take responsibility for the deficit spending. You need to be held accountable for it. We're not going to help you. We're not going to put our fingerprints on raise the debt ceiling. And of course, they ignored us. They're going to play chicken with us. And now it's coming right down here to a couple of weeks left of extraordinary measures. Now, what's also interesting is all the scaremongering coming out of people like Janet Yellen, and every Democrat, and let's face it, every basic news media as well, this calamity of defaulting on our debt. We get in to the federal government hundreds of billions of dollars every month, regularly in revenue. Everybody sitting around this Zoom meeting has to manage their cash. You know how to prioritize spending. There is absolutely no need to put the full faith and credit of the United States at risk. There's no reason to withhold Social Security checks or veterans benefit checks. We have more than enough revenue to prioritize it. Now, might some government agencies have to shut down for lack of cash? That's a possibility, but that'll be the Democrats' fault. They're passing all the spending in partisan basis. They can increase the debt ceiling. There's no reason whatsoever to not have them do that. But again, they're going to play chicken with us, with the American public, with the American economy. And of course, they always rely on the fact that the press is going to back them up and blame us rascal Republicans. But in this instance, I think Leader McConnell's done a pretty good job of holding everybody in line. I think my letter certainly helped that. They put their signature, they're not going to do it. So hopefully people will honor that, and Democrats will take the responsibility and be held accountable by the public in 2022 for this massive increase in the debt, their deficit spending, the increase in inflation, the crisis on the border, the embarrassing surrender in Afghanistan. Again, this has been a rolling series of disasters under this under the Biden administration. I hope the American public is paying attention. I hope they understand, as Mark Levin writes in his book, they have to be awakened to the urgency of this moment. We're at a hinge point in this nation. Are we going to recognize America in a year or two, or are we going to continue down this socialist path to a point of no return? But on that happy note, I'm happy to answer any questions you have.
Great, thanks, Ron. A couple things. I saw you on a recording. I think it was yesterday. You were on the Senate floor. You made a lot of comments about COVID, the vaccine. Lack of good transparency in terms of data. Is there anything you could share with folks about what you talked about? I thought it was,
Sure.
It was great.
Yeah, it has been grotesque how the mainstream media have just completely distorted what my points are. My points from the beginning have always been support early treatment. Why aren't we doing that? What other medical condition where don't we basically go by the guidance of early detection, allows for early treatment, produces better outcomes? Now, we've not only ignored early treatment, the health agencies have literally sabotaged it. Calling ivermectin, that is a Nobel Prize winning drug, a wonder drug, billions of doses. The safety profile is unbelievably safe. Over 25 years, 39 deaths on the VAERS system compared to 16,000 deaths in 10 months associated in the VAERS system with the COVID vaccine. And they're trash talking ivermectin. So again, I've always pushed early treatment, always been baffled why we didn't robustly explore the cornucopia of drugs. It's not just ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine, budesonide. There's all kinds of corticosteroids. There's all kinds of combination of drugs is what most of these doctors are treating COVID early and having, according to them and their patients, great success. But we've ignored it. Why? Because remdesivir, which is the approved drug, it's not approved, it's emergency use authorization, costs $3,000, and these other pills cost literally pennies per tablet. Is it because with an effective therapy, you can't get an emergency use authorization on they call it a vaccine. This is not a traditional vaccine. I was all for Operation Warp Speed. I've gotten every vaccine since the swine flu. I'm not getting this one because I had COVID. And more science is coming out that natural immunity is probably better, and probably better by a long margin, long-term versus the vaccine. But we can't even ask the question, much less look at the science and talk about it. There's so much that is unexplainable in terms of how we've handled COVID. There's so many self-inflicted wounds. It's just tragic. So what I've been on this floor of the Senate over the last couple days and weeks, I've just been providing the information that, if I say it on media, I get attacked. I might as well go on the Senate floor. At least people can watch it at that point before they start censoring it. But unfortunately, we can't look at U.S. data because our health agencies, if they're not collecting it, they're certainly not revealing it other than the VAERS. They're ignoring VAERS. But they touted it in October, said, hey, listen, if we're going to look at adverse events, if you miss a couple of days of work, we're going to have a CDC representative on the phone talking to you, figuring out what's happening. And yet they've turned a blind eye to 16,000 deaths, 750,000 adverse events. And they're all saying, well, there's no proof there's any cause. Well, 5,200 of those deaths have occurred on day 0, 1, or 2. Maybe it doesn't prove cause, but it certainly would give me concern. It does concern me. It's apparently not concerning them. So we have to look to England. We have to look to Israel. And that's some of the things I've been on the Senate floor, just talking about Public Health England, one of their national health agencies, of 600,000 Delta cases over the last 7.5 months. It's about 80% of their cases, 2,542 deaths, 63% of them, 1,613 of those deaths are with fully vaccinated individuals. Now, we've got a president saying, this is a pandemic of the unvaxxed. If you get the vaccination, you're not going to get sick. You're not going to the hospital. You're not going to die. You're not even going to get COVID. Clearly, that's not the truth. But that's what the media, that's what the social media, that's what the health agencies, that's what this administration wants you to know. And again, why am I saying this? Because I'm so adamantly opposed to these mandates. It is not irrational for people not to want to put an experimental vaccine in their arms. It's not irrational. The vast majority of people that get COVID thank God, survive. I'm not downplaying the tragedies. I understand 700,000 deaths. And you look at excess deaths, I mean, that's probably a pretty solid number. But a bad flu season is tens of thousands of deaths. Part of the reason you have so many deaths is you probably have COVID is more contagious than normal seasonal flu. More people getting it, more people are dying. I'm not downplaying that. But it's an individual's right to try. It's an individual's right to refuse. And I'm just trying to lay out the case. I'm defending the vaccine injured because nobody else is standing up for them. I'm defending the people that are pushing back on the mandates. How about nurses? How about doctors that had the courage and compassion to treat COVID? They caught COVID. Some of them tragically died. Most survived. Now they're treating vaccine injuries. There is no way they are going to get the vaccine. No way. I'm talking to them. We already have a nursing shortage. This is going to exacerbate our healthcare worker shortage. What are we doing? This is insane. So again, I'm basically one of the few people, because I think the rest of my colleagues take a look at how I'm treating the media and look at me as the roadkill, and they go, well, I don't want any part of that. They'll just kind of step over me on the road there. So that's kind of what's at play right now. I'm just trying to provide people with as much information as I think they should have to make an informed choice. I'm pushing back on the healthcare agencies that are completely opaque. They're not answering any of my oversight letters. It's grotesque. I mean, my most recent run-in with the PolitiFact check is, based on what the FDA did on August 23rd, they did two things. They approved the Comirnaty, that's the BioNTech and Pfizer drug that they even said is not available in sufficient quantities to make it available in the U.S. And as a result, they extend the emergency use on the Pfizer drug that is available. So I've just been pointing out to people, because the mandates are all predicated on that FDA approval. That, again, I don't know whether now Comirnaty is available, but I basically was talking about that. So now I've got it totally false that the drugs available, the vaccines available aren't FDA approved. Well, Moderna's not. Johnson & Johnson isn't. Some of the Pfizer drug isn't. The only stuff that's been approved is Comirnaty, and that the FDA said we don't have sufficient quantities to be available in the U.S. Now, that was back in August. Maybe they're making some quantities available, but I wrote an oversight letter to the FDA on August 26th, just asking the simple question, okay, well, if you're saying these things are equivalent, why didn't you grant FDA approval to the other Pfizer vaccine? Here it is, October 6th. I still don't have an answer. That's how opaque the agencies are. I mean, they obviously know why they did it, because they did it 3 days beforehand, and yet they won't respond to a U.S. senator's request to just clear up the confusion. But again, I can't explain why the government, why media, why social media wants a vaccine in every person's arm, including children, who the science tells us are more affected by seasonal flu than COVID. We do not know the long-term effects on this mRNA technology. We don't. It's a rational decision to say, I think I'll hold off for a few years till we get that data. But people aren't being given that freedom. They're going to lose their jobs. They're going to lose their livelihood. They're going to lose their health care in what I consider unconstitutional but incredibly divisive mandates. I could go on, but I think I probably said enough on this subject.
Well, you're bringing that up. That's probably one of the most asked and discussed issues that we've had over the last several weeks, with the Biden administration's mandate to vaccinate, employers that have over 100 people. A lot of people call and say, what do I do? If I don't want to be vaccinated, I don't necessarily want to lose my job, but do I have any recourse? And it's a tough issue for folks. Some people are just getting it just to get along, and doing it contrary to what they would believe in. So, what's the most current status of the administration's mandate on vaccinations?
Well, the reason I'm stepping up the plate and I'm getting on more media and I'm talking about these things and I'm drawing fire is to make people aware of this, that hopefully we can defeat these mandates. Hopefully the Biden administration, by the way, they haven't imposed a regulation through OSHA yet. It's just a threat that's out there. Again, most of the vaccine, I believe this is true, but I don't have the figures. But I think it's still true. Most of the vaccine that is being administered in the US is probably not FDA approved, but they come up with a big announcement that it's FDA approved when most of it was not, certainly not at the time. I don't know the current status. They're doing this all to pave the way for the mandates, to give employers the cover. So that, again, if the employer's doing this because they're going to get fined by OSHA, it's not the employer's fault. I will probably be introducing a piece of legislation. By the way, I'm no friend of the trial bar. Okay, I'm not a fan of lawsuits, but I'm introducing a piece of legislation. I hopefully have some very good co-sponsors on this that will not preclude a cause or right of action at a state level against employers who impose a mandate, and then somebody who, under duress, takes the vaccine and can prove a vaccine injury. I mean, I think people who, again, under duress have lost their job, lost their livelihood, lost their health care, take a vaccine they do not want, and then all of a sudden experience paralysis or a loved one dies. I mean, this is happening. This isn't make believe. You know, whenever I hear people say, you know, these adverse events are mild and rare, as Ken Rector said in my event on the vaccine injured, they're mild and rare until they happen to you. And again, I'll spout the numbers: 750,000 reports of adverse events on the VAERS system, 16,000 deaths, 5,200 occur on days 0, 1, and 2. And again, if you pay any attention to the news, you have seen anecdote after anecdote, tragic anecdotes of people dying and being severely injured by the vaccine, as well as people dying even though they've been fully vaccinated. So the bottom line, what is the purpose? What's the legitimacy of vaccines and the mandates when we know even if you're vaccinated, you can get infected, you can transmit it? Now, maybe your rate of severe reaction or severe symptoms and death is reduced. I think that's what the science is telling us, which is a good reason to get the vaccine if you choose to do so. But again, what I've just given you, the kind of discussion, first of all, I don't have time on most media hits to lay the case out this way. So you do it piecemeal, which just opens you up to attacks because, well, you didn't qualify it this way. I mean, it's incredibly frustrating, but again, I'm Congress. I don't have to get a vaccine. Nobody can mandate it to me, which is always interesting, isn't it? Congress is, but trust me, I think most offices will force their employees to do it. It won't be forced in my office, that's for sure. But again, I'm just trying to get out there to, give people who are facing what are just life-altering decisions they should not be forced to have to make right now, to at least give them a little ammo with their employers and hopefully break through from a standpoint of publicity that maybe the government won't impose these mandates and maybe employers will think twice.
You know, we get a lot of calls from businesses about incentives. Money's coming down from the federal government to help them out. Restaurant revitalization fund has really been a lifeline for a lot of local restaurants, but only about a third of them have been funded. Now that the portal is closed, SBA kind of knows how much is needed to the fund remaining restaurants. Any movement, any activity to reopen that, and what should local restaurants do to help move that along?
Well, and I've spoke to the Restaurant Association, by the way, completely supportive of them. The reason I was opposed and spoke out about PPP is that it was a shotgun approach. I mean, the stimulus checks. I mean, classic example, I have good numbers on that. At the worst of the recession, we were down 25 million jobs. And yet multiple times, I think it's been 3 times now, we've sent out stimulus checks, direct payments to 166 million Americans. 25 million jobs lost, sending checks out to 166 million Americans. What's the rationale for that? The same thing with PPP. We just poured hundreds of billions of dollars. We set the threshold so low. And by the way, no business should be harassed because they accepted a PPP loan, because the hurdle rate was, well, because of uncertain economic times, I'm going to take that loan because I think I might need it. Well, anybody could have said that during COVID. And so the result, we poured hundreds of billions of dollars into businesses that didn't need it at all. Businesses that probably, in some cases, did better during the pandemic. And as a result now, that money's gone. It's been spent. It's contributing to inflation, but we don't have enough money to provide to the people who actually did need it. So what I always said from day one, you can't shut the American economy down. You just can't. You certainly can identify businesses and events that represent a significant threat of out of control spread, and by government mandate, shut them down, but then, fully compensate them for it, fully compensate them. Now, I was always using a business interruption model. I talked to insurance companies, have this thing administered through them rather than through the banks. Because what happened with the banks is, and it makes perfect sense, the banks made sure the PPP loans went out first to people that owed them money. And so if you're a successful small business that didn't have any debt, you had a pretty difficult time. You didn't get off, you were prevented from getting to the trough. I think that's probably the case. A lot of these restaurants that still haven't gotten relief. Again, they didn't like debt. I agree with that. I don't like being in debt. But as a result, they were completely shafted by these well-intentioned but very poorly designed government relief programs. So the solution is, and this is what I've talked to the Restaurant Association, is you're going to have to find a must-pass piece of legislation. And this is where you literally got to go to Tammy on the Senate and make sure that, this largesse, these hundreds of billions, these trillions of dollars they're going to spend on new entitlements. How about diverting some of that to people that really do need it and deserve it? And I'll be totally supportive of that as well. But let's face it, Tammy probably holds more sway with the Bernie Sanders and Ron Wyden and those folks.
We talked a bit about the debt ceiling limitations and that issue, but there's a couple of big spending bills in front of Congress. The infrastructure bill, I think, is $1.1 trillion. The human infrastructure bill, Build Back Better budget bill is $3.5 trillion. I've heard it's up to $5.5 trillion. What's the latest on that? And I've been kind of trying to follow along with that and the strategies that Republicans, Democrats have, and how they're trying to work through that. So if you can give us a little update about that, that'd be great.
Well, again, a quick explanation: $3.5 to $5.5 trillion. That's just literally they create new entitlements, but they say they'll sunset in 2 years, and we all know they won't. So that's why it's probably more like 5.5. And if you do the unfunded liability into infinity, it's much larger figure than that. The infrastructure bill, which I was supportive of infrastructure, but I always thought the Republican position ought to be take the $700 billion of the COVID relief that's not spent till 2022 and beyond, repurpose that. $700 billion, that would have basically paid for the infrastructure that really is necessary. And then that should have been our position, and we should have stuck to it. We should have messaged that. I think we would have had a great deal of public support. But again, you've always got people that, fiscal responsibility is always lower on the totem pole than the altar of bipartisanship. So they went for a larger package. In the end, about $500 billion in new spending, half of which was not paid for. So add another $250 billion to our deficit. But nowadays, what's $250 billion? It's pocket change. So just why I voted against that bipartisan infrastructure bill. Now, I think part of the thinking of the passage of that, and this wasn't necessarily bad thinking, is if you worked with Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema and showed them that bipartisanship would work to pass something that most people recognize we do need to invest in our infrastructure, that maybe that will take pressure off of them supporting the Bernie budget, and it might be working. So, I will admit that they had a good game plan here, because from my standpoint, gridlock on the Bernie budget is a really good thing. I honestly wouldn't mind gridlock on the entire package, because then I think we come back with the $700 billion proposal, repurpose the out year spending, and not increase our debt, which is unsustainable. But it's hard to game all these things out. But the current play is what Joe Manchin and Kirsten Sinema are saying in terms of what they will support isn't big enough for Bernie. It's not big enough for AOC. So Democrats are totally gridlocked. And most times in Washington, D.C., gridlock is better than the action we take, the bills we pass. So I can pretty well guarantee you that gridlock within Democratic Party is always a good thing.
And the end of August was kind of a painful time for our country with our withdrawal from Afghanistan. I mean, it was tough to see how that was. Unfortunately, I hate to say the word botched, but it was botched. Issues with the administration, but also the Joint Chief of Staff and his role in that. And any insight on that? Question was really relating to whether it's something that he's going to be looking at the chairman of the Joint Chief of Staff, and in terms of his violation of some of the chain of command issues there.
Well, I'll reserve judgment until we actually get the readout notes from what the conversation was. It sounds like he was acting on orders from the Secretary of Defense as well. So we need to see the bigger picture on that and get all the information. I think what's inexcusable is, what's he doing interviewing with these little tell-all books? You've got a nation you need to keep secure. So I think that, currently that's, I think the one criticism I'm happy to level against General Milley. And again, I mean, it certainly appears, pretty darn inappropriate what he did. How he's explained it subsequently, as opposed to how it was described in the book, makes a little bit more sense. If you're under orders, you're making sure that we're deconflicting, that the other side doesn't press the button first. I mean, that really would be his job. But again, I just want to, I don't like rushing to judgment when I know we're going to get actual readouts of those conversations. In terms of the embarrassing surrender in Afghanistan, I mean, as much as we all know what a disaster that was, in spite of President Biden saying it was an extraordinary success, it should concern all of us, the denial of reality of not only of the president, but so many people in his administration, the border crisis, what happened in Afghanistan. We're not going to know the true disaster of that probably for years, maybe decades. I never supported the full withdrawal from Afghanistan. I don't think we probably ever should have put troops in there the way we did. I think we probably accomplished the mission. And certainly once we got rid of Osama bin Laden, and you had the whole Tora Bora instance. And again, hindsight's best sight. I think the best book I read in Afghanistan really was written by special ops guys, and they said, we pretty well did what we needed to do before Tommy Frank ever put a boot on the ground. But we did put boots on the ground, and we made real progress. And it's very difficult to see. It will be very difficult to watch the loss of freedom, the loss of rights for women, the oppression, the brutality. Now, by and large, news media will be blocked out. We won't see most of the brutality, but it'll be awful. The fact that we're giving up an incredibly strategic air base. What I always thought we should have done is maintain about a contingent of, and I'll take the Joint Chiefs recommendation, 2,500 to 3,500 troops. I'd have made them special operation guys. That would have prompted our NATO allies to keep another 7,500 or 10,000 troops, a sufficient force to support the Afghan security forces who are fighting and dying for their freedom, keeping the Taliban at bay, keeping Afghanistan from being a more robust haven for terrorists. That would have been a long-term strategic initiative. Wouldn't cost us all that much. I think the benefit would have far exceeded the cost. We weren't losing many members of the military, thank God. I think we could have stayed that posture in a very fortified Bagram Air Force base. So that's what we should have done. But the fact that we've given up that air base now probably be turned over to the Chinese. The fact that ISIS is operating in Afghanistan, the Al-Qaeda, we're kind of right back to the 1990s prior to 9/11, and it puts our nation at risk. It was very, very unwise, really stupid. But I'm reminded what Barack Obama apparently said behind closed doors: never underestimate Biden's ability to F things up. And he's going to do it. And he's also, like Robert Gates said, he's been wrong in every major foreign policy decision for the last 40 years. Why would he start, becoming right on these things now? It's again, pretty depressing to think we got another 3.5 years of this.
Well, at least he's consistent. So immigration policy is appears to be a blunder. You see reports. I know you've been down to the border several times. Congressman Grothman has been down there several times and reported back on what's really happening. But still the American people don't really know and see what's happening. It's tough watching people kind of pour over the border. I mean, we don't allow people easy access, coming from Canada into the United States, but folks that we are not vetted, or folks that we don't know who they are, seem to be able to come over the border 100,000 plus on a monthly basis. So any congressional activity on that we in any way that curtails some of that?
No, the Democrats wouldn't help us during the Trump administration. Their president's for open borders. Again, it's accurate to call this president and members of his administration incompetent, but it's being too kind. This is their policy. They wanted to surrender and bug out of Afghanistan like they did in Iraq. They want open borders, and they know this. They knew this was going to happen. They know all the depredations that are associated with this illegal flow. So, the actual numbers on this, we still are returning people under Title 42. So even though we've had probably about 1.5 million people come to this country and apprehended and encounter with the Border Patrol, I finally did get the numbers. It's about 500,000 have been dispersed so far in the first 9 months, 500,000. So we'll be up to, if you just prorate that, a little under 700,000 people dispersed. That's larger than the population of the state of Wyoming, larger than the population of the state of Vermont. So that's what we're talking about. What is so frustrating about this is, without help from Democrats, President Trump had pretty well secured the border, taking the first step that we need to take in order to address the DACA situation and set up a functioning legal immigration system. We were this close. My Operation Safe Return, we presented that, and actually Kirsten Sinema signed on to that with me. We presented that DHS. It actually morphed into the Return to Mexico, which was a highly successful policy. The other agreements he had with Mexico and Central America, we were building the wall. There were consequences. So the flow of unaccompanied children, the flow of family members, family units coming in this country, taking advantage of our asylum laws, was pretty well stopped. We were a couple hundred miles from building the border fence that also would have made a pretty big impact. And that all got blown up on day 1 or 2 of the Biden administration. Now we're seeing the disastrous effects. I don't know how you put the genie back in the bottle. It took Trump 4 years. He had a huge surge because of what Obama did with DACA. This is a disaster. I don't know how else to describe it. Rodney Scott, the recently retired chief of Border Patrol, he's been on Brett Baier. Now we'll have him testify in a quasi hearing next 2 weeks from now. He's openly talking about we're arresting terrorists trying to get in this country. We don't know who these people are. We don't know who the people are really coming in from Afghanistan. We're biometrically screening. We're taking biographic information to compare them against derogatory databases. How many ISIS fighters are on a no-fly list? How many Al-Qaeda terrorists are on our terrorist watch list? Some of them might be, but we're not positively identifying people. We've granted them this asylee status, which grants them rights. They can just walk off the base. There's nothing that holds them other than additional immigration benefits. If they stay on the base, go through the State Department's refugee program, then they get additional benefits. That's why most of them are staying on the base. But I think there are reports about 1,000 have already walked off. Who are those 1,000 people? It should concern us. It's obviously not concerning this administration. So no, that's just, it's again, sorry guys, I wish I could, put smiles on your faces.
It's truly frustrating for everyone, because we see it, and you see it not just in the media, and it's kind of question whether what you're seeing in the media is actually true or not. And but we do see a lot of this stuff come roost at home. I mean, labor shortage, for example. We made huge steps forward since last March in terms of the economy, and some monies were injected and to kind of demand side moving. I'm not sure if that was well timed or not, or even needed for that matter. But labor shortage is something that's holding us back, and there's got to be people out there. I mean, how do we get them off the sideline and back into applying for jobs and getting back into becoming productive citizens again?
Well, stop paying them not to work. Obviously that was my proposal, even with the CARES Act, was don't do a set dollar amount plus up. Put an amount equal to about 2/3 of what their wages are. So there's actually incentive for them to go back to work. But the feedback, state unemployment agencies can't handle that type of complicated calculation. Okay, so we did the $600. I think of that, the study showed that 4 out of 5 people that were unemployed continue to make more in unemployment than they ever made in their job. Even once we downgraded to $300 a week, it was about 40% of people made more on unemployment than working the job. So again, people aren't stupid. It's economically beneficial for me to stay unemployed. Now, those benefits have gone away. I'm actually somewhat surprised that the Biden Democrats didn't use their power to do that again. I think this is the power of businesses coming into their representatives' offices and telling them how harmful those programs were. But in the COVID relief package, there's more new entitlements. These things aren't means tested anymore. We've pretty well gotten rid of the welfare reform where we means test benefits. So people just keep we continue to pay people not to work, and guess what? A certain percentage of the population don't work. So now you got the situation with, I don't have the exact numbers, but I think it's like 10 million job openings and 6, 7 people reportedly unemployed. Why? There's no reason for you to be unemployed looking for a job. There are plenty of jobs all over the place. If you can't find in your local community, I guess you're going to have to move. But now we don't even really expect that out of people. I mean, the expectations of people taking personal responsibility have been so lowered. It's like, well, we can't expect people to move to get a job. I would, I did, I would again. But again, so that's an underlying problem. Just in terms of being able to grow our economy, though, we're going to have to expand our workforce even beyond just increasing labor participation. Really good hearing in Budget Committee where we had CBO estimate of I think it was 1.5% growth long term. No, it's 2%. So they were saying about 1.5% of that was related to the financial aspects, productivity. You buy new equipment, you become more productive, and that grows our economy. Then the other 0.5% was increase in the labor market. And you couldn't have more growth because you weren't increasing the labor department. You do need people to work. And so I've always been supportive of an adequate legal immigration system to provide workers for economy. A tragedy of not electing Trump is they pretty well had teed up what I thought is a really good immigration reform bill, took the almost countless number of visas, somewhere around 100. It's hard to get the exact count, shrink that down to, I think it was 6, and have a merit-based scoring system so that you'd get a visa to come to the U.S. into the United States, but based on your willingness to work and your value to our economy. That makes sense. An illegal flow doesn't. It just doesn't. And what's even worse about it is how do you get those people in the workforce? I mean, they're living in the shadows. They're not going to trust any kind of program. They work under the table. They get exploited by their employers. I mean, it's all around bad. It's, an illegal system is bad. A legal system we need, and we were that close to it. We were that close, and Biden blew it all up.
We have a bunch of other questions that have come in. However, we're butting up against our time limit here. So I know one question that came up a lot is, are you running for re-election?
Literally haven't made that decision. I'll ask all of you, do you get the sense in Wisconsin that they're just waiting for a U.S. Senate campaign to start up? I mean, I don't get that sense. I think I'm doing everybody a favor. We're delaying the campaign. I think I'm saving how much the campaign is going to cost by not making a decision yet. We've got plenty of time. Remember, I didn't decide, and John, you know this, I didn't decide until the end of April, announced mid-May in 2010. That seemed to work out okay. And even back then, I was kind of waiting for Tommy Thompson to decide. He announced on tax day, April 15th, down at that Tea Party rally in Madison. So got plenty of time. I don't think I'm going to take it that far, but I got plenty of time.
Well, I'm a big fan, so you know where I'm at on that deal. So
I appreciate that. I am getting a lot of positive feedback as I travel around the state. That has an impact. It really does. Understand, John, you know this. I sold plastic for 30 years, so I'm used to rejection. I've got a really thick skin. All these attacks, they really don't bother me. The only way they bother me is what it says about our society, the grotesque bias, dishonesty of our media, and how that's affected. I mean, that's why Joe Biden's elected, because our media and social media are radical leftists, and they chose sides. They picked their guy, and that's who they got elected. That's dangerous in a democracy. We do need a free press, but we'd like one that's a little less biased.
Well, again, we appreciate the work you're doing. Again, I follow you a lot, and your honesty, your truth has been, very apparent. It's good to see. I think people are starting to wake up and are starting to see that, and I think we need that because, as you mentioned, the media bias out there is just tragic. And I think people are rational people. They just want to hear the truth, and they want to, and they will make good decisions based on good information. So keep up that work because people need to hear that stuff. And I know it's tough because you get pounded on all the time, which frankly is just not right. So keep up the good work. We support you. We appreciate what you're doing, and we appreciate you joining us today. Next Wednesday, we do have our Congressman Glenn Grothman is going to be joining us at 10 o'clock. So be looking for that, participate into that. So with that, thanks a lot, Senator, for joining us and for sharing your insight with us. And
okay, we'll see. Let's all hope truth prevails. Stay well, everybody. Take care.
Okay, take care. Thanks, Ron.